no matter what, it's your fault as a rider. Like nobody put you in this situation.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whether it's product or physical performance, you got yourself there.
Chris, we got you on the call because we want to talk a little bit about the difference of when your bike comes into play versus body posture and fitness, etc. So do you want to first just give us a background on who you are and what your job entails?
So basically I'm a coach, really, covering all aspects of performance from the physical preparation right through to how that physicality and that physically prepared athlete applies it come practice, come race day on the track. And I work mainly with professional athletes, or exclusively with professional athletes for 2020, actually, EWS and downhill World Cup, so gravity mountain bikers.
You forget about me.
I just send you whatever copy and paste.
On my side, I've always kind of been fascinated with human performance and aside from technological improvements of the bike. I mean, you really, and people are asking like where we meet and how one affects the other, and you can't really draw a line. Each one affects each one completely.
Oh yeah, well, it's a system. It's the ecological psychologists and stuff will call it a complex system, wherein the subsystems of all the parts that work together to make a rider and a bike go down a hill really fast all have a different impact on each other at different times for different reasons. So it's super complex, and at all times bike, rider and track together are this little mini system that works together. And at any given time, my job as primarily as physical preparation, but also as kind of like mentor and trackside analysis, and that whole gamut of performance improvement can be super important. And then all of a sudden at another time I have zero answers, and revolving a shock or twisting some clickers or giving someone the confidence in their suspension is going to make the big difference, and that's your side of things. You know what I mean? So
I mean, I guess it's cyclical, right? It's like you make the bike work, then the rider adapts to the bike, then you need to make the bike work better, then the rider needs to adapt to that, or however you want to look at it. It's like as you improve coordination or strength, you can change settings.
It's complex, huh?
It's incredibly complex, and it's not one-dimensional in any way.
Nah, you can't just be like, right, set and forget, see you, bye-bye, because the brain controls all at the end of the day, and someone's head will implode eventually.
And we've talked about this multiple times, but what feels good one day might not feel good the next day, even though nothing's changed other than something in your complex little head.
Yeah. And like the body, even I think the body maybe is probably what changes the most. So if the suspension degrades over 4 or 5 days riding, say if you did 15 runs on some World Cup type track or some massive EWS stages, and you did 4 or 5 days like that, then the viscosity of the oil would change, and bushings and damp and seals and that sort of stuff. So you get this change in suspension which could affect performance. But really, if you're looking at day-to-day changes, it's going to be fatigue, and that fatigue will eventually have a mental impact. That's where the small changes are coming in. That's where my job in terms of physical prep and making sure people get less fatigued, or the fatigue has less of an impact on coordination and technique application and all that sort of stuff. So
how do you usually find yourself diagnosing those issues? Is it more so the upfront prep, or are you kind of diagnosing on race days a lot of times?
I suppose if you're looking at diagnosing, if you're going to try and pinpoint a particular part of the system that's causing an issue or can be improved, bike or rider or whatever, or the rider's interaction with the track, so that would be line choice and strategy and that sort of stuff. I really think you're going to struggle to get very pinpoint accurate answers, because it is so complex, and it's going to be experience that's going to lead you down the right path. You know what I mean? And you're probably going to hedge your bets, and I'm going to say, oh yeah, look, you probably are fatigued or whatever if there is a problem. It's been 2 races back to back or whatever, so you're going to have to make sure pre-race day, after qualies, you manage recovery, nutrition, sleep, all the basic building blocks. But I hedge the bets, and you're like, I'll go see Jordi, have a chat, see what Jordi thinks. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like, that'd be, for me anyway, that'd be a standard part of the process, to be like, always approach it from multiple directions.
It's the same for me, I think. It's, you bounce one thing off the other guy. If a rider comes in and I know the setting's good, or I feel like it should be good, and they're complaining about something, sometimes talking to Chris, if it's his rider, you can get a feeling for where their headspace and where their physical abilities are. Whereas there's some people just aren't fit. And when they come down saying, oh, my hands hurt, this hurts, at a certain point to race a World Cup, you have to be able to hold on to this bike at certain settings. And if you're going way outside of that envelope, you're not going to go fast. There's just no way. You can't make a bike more comfortable and keep those speeds up.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think
me and Jordi do have a real good relationship with the races where you're kind of like, you could almost answer each other's questions occasionally when it comes to certain riders anyway.
in trackside, then I'd see things where you're just like, that bike looks like it's maybe packing down, or maybe the rider just isn't strong enough, or maybe there's a fear element or some sort of psychological element where they're just slightly off the back and just have a little bit too much weight in the rear of the bike, and so the front end isn't tracking. So there'll always be good information exchange between me and Jordi, and just generally gathered from all directions that you can always apply to hopefully solve a problem.
I think the fear thing is an interesting point too, because I think as a species we're programmed to push away from anything scary.
Yeah, funny, yeah.
You don't drag yourself in and get aggressive. Well, most people don't. Even if it's unconscious. You come to something that you've been struggling with and you push yourself back. Your bike's no longer doing what it was doing 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, and someone will have like a particular issue with that section of the track and come see Jordi or whoever their suspension tech is and be like, oh, this isn't working here or there or whatever, but actually it's just them hanging off the back or getting real rigid. Or what I often see, especially living in Morzine, like living in the Port de Soleil, when you see all the tourists riding tracks that are probably a level above what they're used to at home.
The big alpine terrain, what you'll always see is like a flexion biased posture. So instead of them like standing tall, hinged, relaxed, using the limbs as springs, using the natural elasticity in our body to absorb the small bumps, so then your brain and your vision can tend to the bigger choices on trail.
They'll actually just be in this like flexion posture where like knees are bent too much, hips are bent too much, center of mass is like low and back, and that's just a safety place to be, because the further down and back your center of mass is, the less place it has to go if you get off balance.
So it might feel slightly safe, but actually it's terribly fatiguing and terribly impossible to ride a bike like that. And I'll see that heaps with like your kind of average Joe rider in Morzine. You're like, oh, so it's like a flexion bias, where then the better riders will have a slight more extension bias, or like they'll be happy to be upright, ready to attack the terrain. And that's, I suppose, why they call that the attack position. Some coaches would call it,
That's super interesting. So does that tie in at all to that chart that you have drawn, that doodle you have?
Dude, chart. Don't you go making it sound sciencey, buddy. Chart in the doodle. Well, I call it prime posture. I think people will call it the ready position, the attack position, all of those sorts of things, and I don't think either of those things really kind of fully encapsulated what good posture is on the bike. And I suppose good posture
is always going to be dynamic, but it has like a set point. So it has this parameter that you stay within when you're doing nothing else on trail, if that makes sense. So you'll always come back to this place of
a neutral or a reset.
Yeah, a neutral kind of place where that's where you'll go back to in between doing other stuff on the track. So in between having to apply your technique, and technique applied is skill.
So basically you're riding on the track and you're going to try and apply technique in the right dose at the right time. And that's your skill basically. And that's trying to get from A to B as fast as possible. When you're not doing that, you're kind of in this prime posture. So in my head, I was just like, eyes are up, spine is neutral. Spine is stacked on top of a stable pelvis, which is hind over a strong set of legs, which are perched on top of an elastic set of ankles. That was it really in my head.
Like any sport, your attack position or your neutral position doesn't always feel very good. At first, at least, it feels awkward because you're used to doing this certain thing. At least for me, coming from like a slightly puzzler side of riding, I've worked on that neutral position, And then just tried to carry it into situations where I know I probably won't come out in the same position. But the more you do it and the more you take that time to reset in between those tech or slightly scary situations, sooner or later you find that you carried that position through this one section, or you came out in the same position that you wanted to.
It's funny.
Not easy.
Funny because,
Like, you know, I work primarily with the best riders in the world, and I'm trackside at World Cups and race EWSs and that sort of stuff. So I see
a far greater percentage of the best doing what they do. But when you were describing what you're describing, what I often see is like this sit down before something happens, especially in practice at World Cups. Riders will have this brief sit where they're just kind of like, well, there's nothing happening here. And then for a split second before the next technical section or the next section where they need to actually do something,
they'll stand into their prime posture, into their ready position, and it's just this momentary, like, super confident, I'm ready to roll type thing. And everything's like, like the elasticity that's naturally available in our limbs is, the joints are all stacked up at these optimal angles to allow the elasticity to deal with all the small bumps, and then the rider just goes off and slaps whatever berm they need to slap, or pop whatever rock iron they need to pop, or just do whatever they do. And you'll see the best riders do it between jumps. They'll go between like sit down lander to quick stand up to quick, you know, application of the right technique on the type of jump they're doing. So
It's true. I mean, you can see it, and you definitely see it during practice runs, watching World Cups.
someone asked, which World Cup rider has the best posture? How and why?
Do I get to pick and then you pick?
Yeah, go, yeah.
Bruni.
You think so?
Well, Aaron,
Aaron and Bruni are quite similar, right?
they're very similar. They're very low.
Yeah, center of mass. So hip pelvis complex, generally kind of where we pinpoint center of mass is, doesn't move very much. So if you got some accelerometer data from, you know, somewhere lumbar spine region with those boys, both of them, and you graphed it x-axis, y-axis, I'm not sure how you do it, but it'll basically draw this nice circle where it moves between a very small, the parameters are very small where that pelvis moves, you know. Someone asked me, how do you improve posture on the bike, especially keeping your head up? Like, get strong. There you go. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Basically.
Get your cockpit set up.
Yeah, cockpit setups for sure. And for me, I think the wide handlebar trend definitely holds back both females and smaller riders and younger riders.
Absolutely. You see it all the time with this spread. Your chest is right in front of your bars and you can't move. You can't shift side to side.
Yeah, you can't do any. You have like, all of a sudden where you can move your center of mass is just so constrained by the width of the bar and what your shoulder, or the width of the bar in relation to the mobility of your shoulders. And obviously the further you get to the end of your mobility ranges, the less strength, the less force you can create or apply. So that becomes bad news.
That's awesome, you guys. There's a ton of valuable information in there. And you guys got any final thoughts?
Yeah, like, information is no good without application. That's kind of one of the principles I operate off. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the goal of a lot of the dialed stuff, is to just empower you to go do it. It's in the video. Like, it is actually right there. You can do it.